If you are a business owner or an investor looking to get clarity and scale in your business, this is a conversation you have to check out. Today, we sit down with Gary Harper, who is the co-founder and co-creator of the Rise Business Framework, and he helps investors and entrepreneurs understand what it takes to hit the 5 stages of business growth. He will help you analyze what's going on in your business and identify the key areas where you need to focus on so that you can grow accordingly. Make sure you check out today's conversation. It's with Gary Harper right here on Multifamily Insights. You probably got interested in real estate for the cash flow, the tax advantages, the equity appreciation, and the long-term wealth creation, not for the 2 a.m. emergency maintenance calls. But let's face it, maintenance can be the biggest headache when it comes to building up your real estate portfolio. And that's why I want to tell you about a new property management software called Hemlane. See, Hemlane is more than your typical software. It's really like having a property management support system. First, Hemlane provides 24/7 repair coordination. They have a network of vetted maintenance technicians and professionals in your area to handle repair and maintenance your property may need. Second, Hemlane helps you advertise your listings and even connects you to licensed agents to help find and place tenants. And third, Hemlane is ranked #1 by Gartner with an average of 4.8 star reviews on repair coordination. Learn how Hemlane can help you manage your properties with 100% transparency and control without the administrative work. And as a Multifamily Insights listener, you will receive 25% off for 2 months when you sign up. Just go to hemlane.com, that's HEMLANE.com, and use Multifamily Podcast 25 as the promo code. Again, that's hemlane.com, or just click the link in the show notes. Gary Harper is the CEO of Sharper Business Solutions and the co-creator of the Rise Business Framework. Now, with over 11 years of executive experience at a Fortune 500 company, Gary specialized in evaluating operational expenses and driving efficiencies. Let's welcome to the show, Gary Harper.
Hey, John, thanks for having me on today, bud.
Absolutely great. Gary, it's great to have you on the show. I went over your bio at a very, very high level. Why don't you take 2 minutes and fill in some of those gaps?
Yeah, so I started off early in my career in like 2000 and started investing in real estate, but also was still working a corporate job. And so I think a lot of listeners, we're all trying to get out of the rat race. I had Robert C. Kiyosaki and some other books inspiring me in the 90s. But really, being a young mind and young entrepreneur and just started off in business, I was trying to figure it out. And I found the best way to do that was just to kind of get mentored by other people. And so I found my brother-in-law, Wayne Schaefer, who was doing real estate, and he imparted on me a lot of wisdom and knowledge in the world of real estate, especially in single family at the time. But growing in corporate America allowed me to learn a lot about business and how it in generally is built, and how to lead and manage and hold people accountable, what process and procedures and policies look like, and what KPIs and structure and all those things. And growing through the ranks in corporate and getting to an executive level allowed me to do just that. And by the time 2006 came around, I was pretty successful in business and had won executive of the year like 9 out of 10 years. But then, I started to make more money and, I needed to offset taxes. And so one of the ways in which I did that was to start investing in real estate more actively, and started a property management company. And then by 2007, 2008, had a lot of rentals of my own. But man, it didn't come without problems. 2008 was a hard year for a lot of investors. And what I thought was my future to my freedom and path to getting out of corporate in that rat race led me to like a bankruptcy. And by 2010, 2011, I found myself, like a lot of investors, licking my wounds, just refocusing my efforts in corporate, and really just diving deep there with no desire at all to ever be, anything real estate again. It really wiped my desire completely away off the face of the earth, kind of like scorching the earth with the sun, man. It just took it completely away, fried it completely. And, I found myself refocused on corporate and ready to drive to the next level from there. And God had other plans for me. I got bit by a tick that year. I came down with Lyme's disease. I went back to like a 5-year-old mental state, couldn't, leave the house, 26 panic attacks a day. Where it bit me got in my nervous system. And it took a while to figure out where it was and kind of what it was and, all the damage that it created. And I found myself facing, life-changing decisions at that point. And grateful for honestly what was happening in my life, because it allowed me to really set my trajectory, my path for what's happened now for the last 14, 15 years. But walking away from corporate America was not a decision I did voluntarily. It was a decision that I had to make. I had to get back into real estate. My brother-in-law, same guy, calls me. He's like, "Hey, do you think God took you out of corporate just to put you right back in it?" And as I healed a year later, I had the option. Do I go back? Do I go full time in real estate? What do I do? And I tried my hand. I was like, I'm going to give this a chance. I'm going to go into real estate. I partnered with my brother-in-law. We did about 300 deals a year till 2016. And, I made a lot of money and made corrected a lot of mistakes, if you will. But by 2016, we were in a mastermind, and we got a call from a couple people in the mastermind, and they were like, "Hey, could you help me scale my business? Can you help me do what you've done with yours?" And I don't have these KPIs, and I don't have this structure. And just like most entrepreneurs, right? It's not like we go to business school, and it's not like we learn these fundamental things of business. We just know how to make money. And making money doesn't always translate to freedom. And so just because you have a bunch of money doesn't mean you can just let go. And so I found my desire shifting, and wanting to get back into helping people. And so really what happened was the years of real estate knowledge and the years of corporate coaching and helping Fortune 500 companies merged together in that moment. And I found like, this is really why God created this for me. This is my purpose. My purpose was to have these struggles and know what it's like to fail as an entrepreneur and come back and rebound, and know what it's like to be successful in corporate America. But then to marry those two together has been really where my purpose in life has become. And my purpose was born to do a good work by helping other people while supporting God's work. And that's been our purpose now for over 10 years. And that's what we want to do. We want to drive success and doing a good work for people. And in return, by earning and doing a good work, we're able to then make enough that we can get back to God's work. And I always say God's work for me is not just a church. It's about the Bible says, if you've done it unto the least of them, you've done it unto me. And so that's what I consider God's work, is helping those that don't have, right? And whether it's they don't have, they need labor, maybe they need influence, maybe they need financial support, or maybe they need experience. But I think my goal is to give of my life, labor, influence, finances, and experience to help other people. And I think if I do that, and I do it in a good way, that fulfills my purpose of doing a good work by supporting God's work. And that's what's led me for these last 12 plus years. We've helped over 4,000 different types of businesses in different capacities at this point. We're in 9 countries. We've written 6 books. We've helped a lot of people. And honestly, we haven't won at everything, but we've had a lot of success, and I've been very grateful for that. And that's led us to where we are today. And now being a part of these podcasts is another way to help more people. Like my voice can only be heard in so many rooms, but on these podcasts, we can reach millions. And that's why we've reached out to you, John, and your amazing podcast here with your awesome listeners to say, hey, how do we expand our reach? How do we help more people? And that's why we're here today. So I thank you for having us on. And hopefully at the end of this call, we'll bring a lot of value to your listeners today.
Gary, love everything you said, man. I appreciate you taking the time to give us that background. And you have a really rich history, right? Really rich experience. And I was taking notes, and I didn't realize it. And I was trying to jot down my notes fast. And you said, life, and you talked about labor, influence, finances, and experience. I'm like, oh, that was an acronym. Okay, got it. But I was going through, man, a couple things jumped out to me in your story, right? So first of all, come from corporate America, like many of our listeners, started doing well there, and you had a good problem to solve, right? You're making a lot of money. How do you start playing a tax game? I know, let's be an active investor. Let's build up this real estate portfolio. That sounds like it was going really well, to the point where you said, hey, you know what? We're going to probably just transition and just do this thing. Ultimately, you end up, 2006, you're scaling this thing up. By 2010, you end up going bankrupt. And obviously the economic downturn really impacted you. Then you had some health issues with Lyme disease and really making you step completely away from corporate. And to be clear, when you talk about corporate, you were executive of the year for 9 out of 10 years. So like, you were thriving in corporate America. So at this time, now you got to step back from corporate. The real estate has burned you to the point where you don't even want to touch or think about getting back into real estate. And you have this time away as you're trying to heal your body. And your brother-in-law says, hey, why don't you consider getting back into real estate? That's ultimately what you decide to do. From there, you end up doing 300 deals a year with your brother-in-law, and then you go on to help other people as well. And that's kind of what your focus has been for the last 10 years. I want to go back to kind of that transition period, though, the first transition period. You mentioned that you were building up your real estate portfolio. That was going well. And then the economic downturn kind of wiped out that portfolio on your behalf, right? As you look back on that, what would you have done differently in your portfolio to be able to weather the storm?
It was a lack of knowledge. It was ignorance and immaturity, I think, that got me into the situation I was in. Now, I know a lot of people that are very experienced and very mature, and they still lost it as well. But I think in my situation, if I'd known what I know today, obviously hindsight's 2020, I probably would have not got houses that I was so deep into loan to value. That was probably one of the biggest mistakes, right?
Being over leveraged?
Yeah. I mean, I
Yeah.
think when the market shifts and things drop, but you don't want to fall under the water, right? So like you want to keep your head above the water. And, every one of the properties I had went underwater, so, and then there was a double-edged sword, I think, that not every investor dealt with, that we dealt with in Northwest Indiana, which is they're 2 years in the rear on taxes, right? So we escrow, and they had came back after 2008 and said that they need to reassess taxes. And so when they reassess taxes, everybody's escrows are short almost 2 years, right? So like they go back 2 years and recap. So now banks are paying that shortage, and then they're over accruing the next year and a half to make up the debt fall. And then they are also over accruing for future, right? Like we can't be at where we are anymore. We have to over accrue. So I mean, taxes went up substantially, and I'd be guessing at the percentage, but like I'd say 3-4x what they were, if not more. And then of course, what does that do to your payments? It balloons your payments. So now you could probably ride the storm, right? Of being over leveraged, especially when you're trying to just generate cash flow. You're not trying to create active income from it. But when cash flow is then taken away, right? Because your payments to the bank are now higher than your 1 year lease agreement with your tenant, you're in a bad place. And so if one of those happens, say I have enough leverage that I go underwater, but now I can go sell it and make 25,000 or more in active income, right? And let the new guy, have a reassessment of the escrow and all that. And that gets baked into his payments because the payments wouldn't have been as high. Then you're out, right? But when you have, 50 plus rentals and they're all underwater and they're all over, you're paying more in payments than you are receiving in rents or leases, that's a problem, and that's where it found me, man. That's where it found me. So where you think I had one out, and I thought I did, then they reassessed. And they didn't do that around the country, right? It's not like they did that in every area of the country. They just really kind of did in our area. And so left a lot of investors here in a really bad way. I even had the bank that I had my loans through went out of business.
Wow.
And I'll tell you, one of the things I did that year, and this is for your listeners, I think one of the reasons why I'm back in real estate and able to have, the success we've had in real estate and outside of real estate is trying to have a good name. And, even though I could not afford to make my payments, I still had my property management company send that, Monique, who was my lender at the time, sent her every dime. Every dime that came in, I had it sent to her, and did it cover it all? No, it didn't. And that's why I eventually had to file bankruptcy. But, she told me, she's like, you might be one of the only investors still paying us.
Wow.
And I thought about that. I'm like, wow, like how do they get away with that? And, ethically it's wrong. I guess, legally, you have the right to not to pay it, and let it go back and then keep the money from the renter, right? Like, and that's what people were doing. People were keeping the rents and not paying their lenders. And they were stockpiling money, to come out and then maybe pay some of these off with cash. I just bring myself to do that. I think the Bible says that, it's better have a good name than great riches. And I was like, I think I need to pay my bills. And so I did. And at the end of it, I kept my name, even though we went through a rough time. I mean, my lender, like, bro, if I was in your situation, I think I'd file bankruptcy at this point. Like, you've done everything you can do. It's,
Right.
everybody's struggling with this. And so it's where I left myself, right? Like it's where I ended up. But even that, I still walked away going, I don't think I'm going to do this again,
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate you sharing because it's there's the legal aspect of it and the ethical aspect of it. And I was literally just having this conversation last night with another investor friend of mine, and I was sharing a story that was somewhat similar where we were doing a flip project, and the contractor was my partner. He was supposed to be in charge of all the renovations and all the project. Well, he just went AWOL one day and left the project. And every contractor I spoke to told me they need another $100,000 to finish the work based on the draw. So I went to the private money lender and I said, listen, here's the situation. I only have like 30,000 left in the draw. And by the way, this lender had lended on like all of this guy's projects. So they were in the same boat for like 5 or 6 different projects. And I said, listen, it's not your fault. It's not my fault. It is what it is. I will finish the project, but I need a lot more money. This is actually going to make me lose more money because I'm going to have to pay you guys the holding costs to do this. But we started ethically. I feel like it's the right thing to do, but I need some help. Otherwise, I can just give you the keys. And they were like, "Yep, here you go. Here's the rest of it." We finished the project. They were made whole. They actually they made a lot of money on that deal. I lost a ton of money on that deal. But it goes back to that point, right? It's like, yes, I could have cut my losses there, and on paper would have been the better thing for me. But I think my name, just the character, like it was really important. I think there's something to say about that, right? Like, yes, legally you could do the financially, respectable thing, and it's business. People understand. But I also think when people believe in you, you want to pay off that belief as best as you can. So I appreciate you sharing that. Let's go back, and I want to stay here, but I want to fast forward. You go through that, done with the real estate. Let me focus on corporate. You focus on corporate, you're still crushing it. Lyme disease hits you. As this is going on and you are struggling to figure out how, just day to day life stuff, right? How do you decide that you even want to get back into real estate? I know you mentioned your brother talked to you, but like given the negative experience and now you've got the health issue, just talk to me about kind of the progression of your mindset as far as your outlook on life and what you felt you were called to do next.
Well, I mean, my first thought was there's no way. And then the second thing is, I have a responsibility to take care of my family. And, I tried to go back to corporate and, there was something about getting sick and Lyme and all that. When it attacks your nervous system, like it did me and that kind of thing, I had a lot of PTSD even after healing. Right. So like, I had to, even though my body was getting stronger and I was getting healthier, I still struggled with the PTSD of like, if I venture out on my own, will I end up calling 911 again? Right.
Mm.
And so like that's a real vulnerable type, admission, but like that's what it was. And like here I am leaving home at 17, 16, 17 years old and I'm independent my whole life, right? But like I found myself to a point where I was no longer independent, and I had to figure out a way to still take care of my family. And, I was traveling, flying around the world and all that for corporate. And that's something I just couldn't do anymore. And as I tried and to venture out and do it, and I found that, my mind's got to heal now, not just my body, and so I was somewhat forced into it to that degree because, it was the only outlet I had to take care of my family. And so I wouldn't say I went after it with any, being excited or zealous or like, excited about where I was going. It was just more out of necessity, and it was probably the best thing for me. It kept me close to home. I was able to do things from my house and things like that. And so it just allowed me that extra year to not just heal my body, but my mind. And then I found success with it. I found success relatively early with it. The risk was low because we were double closing, like wholesaling houses. And so, I wasn't holding anything long term. So if that felt, better, it was more active income than passive income for sure. And so like it felt less risky and it's something I was actually pretty good at. So, I think I started to find a love-hate relationship for it. I loved the opportunities and the money it gave me, and I hated doing real estate at the same time. So like it just found myself there. And then, we fast forward 2016 and I was able to recover physically, mentally, emotionally, and financially. And then I was done again. I was like, I don't want to do real estate anymore, because I just don't love the act of buying and selling real estate. I know some people do, but I don't, and I've never have. And so that's where I found myself in 2016. And really, I mean, sometimes you got to go through things in life to find your purpose on the other side. And so many people push back on not wanting to face struggle and not wanting to face, anxieties and fears and things like that. But, sometimes the best door to walk through is the thing that you hate the most, because on the other side of it is the thing you love the most. And people, I don't know how many times I think in my life I've seen people turn away. They turn away from what the struggle is. They turn away from what the fear is. They turn away from what the anxiety brings, and they'd rather go a different path, not knowing. And it's, ignorance steps in here, but not knowing what's on the other side of that door. And there's a lot of freedom on the other side of that door. There's a lot of empowerment on the other side of that door. There's a lot of, success on the other side of the door. And that's why I tell people there are 4 reasons why people don't grow in success and get to where they want to be. And number 1 is fear. It's the number 1 reason. Fear is a powerful thing, And I always tell people, if before you give up on your fear, replace it with knowledge. Hmm. Knowledge helps us overcome fear, and then we use faith to sustain it. And then number 2 is the mindset of people. People have a mindset that stops them growing. One of the ways you can check to see if you have the right growth mindset is to evaluate, do you make a lot of statements or do you ask a lot of questions? John, I'd have to assume that you've been doing a podcast for a while now, that you've grown a lot.
Absolutely.
Individual, grown a lot with your business, grown a lot in how you help people, because the very nature of this podcast is to ask questions. And growth-minded people ask a lot of questions, right? And because what happens is when we have a closed mind, we like a lot of statements. And when we have a closed mind, we don't grow. And I always tell people that, making statements closes the mind, asking questions opens the mind. You're willing to receive when you ask questions. So number 2 reason why we don't grow is we find ourselves making too many statements. That'll never work. I've done that before and it didn't work then. Oh, well, I'm afraid of that. Just generalized statements in general close our mind. And as leaders, when we're leading organizations, when we make a lot of definitive statements, we close the minds of people around us. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes that's not such a good thing. If you're in charge of something and the outcome is what it needs to be, sometimes you got to put your foot down and go, no, this is what we're going to do. And you make a statement. What does that do? It closes everybody down. They're like, well, I guess we're going to do it this way. All right. And sometimes that's a good thing. But individually, we need to be more open. We need to ask more questions. I always say great leaders ask great questions, because great leaders have a mindset of growth. And number 3 is connections. Another beautiful thing about a podcast is all the connections that are made and all the different people you're meeting, right? And so you'll never know when you get somebody that you meet in a connection that's going to forever change your trajectory of where you're going. Thank God my sister found my brother-in-law, Wayne, when I was 12 years old and made that connection, because I don't think my life would be where it is today without his connection in my life, right? And then last is systems and processes, right? Like the number 1 reason why we don't grow is we don't have the right systems and processes to help us get there, which is why I wrote the Rise Business Framework. I wrote the Rise Business Framework for that very reason. Like, how do we create a substantial system that allows entrepreneurs to grow properly? And what does it do to help them get there? And so that's why Rise was born. And now for the last 15 years, we've been helping people with business systems, processes, procedures, leadership, KPIs, meeting structure, communication, things like that, to help them grow properly. And it's been a fun journey.
Gary, what I appreciate is, as you broke down kind of the 4 things that hold people back, right? Fear, mindset, connections, and systems and processes. We can also see it in your journey, right? So when you talk about real estate in particular, like you didn't really love real estate, but you love what real estate could do for you. But when you went back into it the second time, you went into it with a different approach. Now you weren't going to be over leveraged on these single family homes. You were doing more wholesaling, right? So now you're being more active, you're doing more transactional work, but you're not kind of in charge of the landlord and operational side. And that's something I think is really important, because most people know real estate can help them build wealth, but like you, very few people actually want to be landlords. Like, I don't know anyone who is like, man, I can't wait to be a landlord. Like, man, I can't wait for someone to call me with a problem. Like, most of us don't want that, right? We are willing to deal with that to get cash flow and to get appreciation and depreciation, all the benefits that come with it. But very few of us want to do the work, which is why in our business, we do apartment syndications and we partner with folks who want all the perks of owning real estate without the headaches of it. But it's not for everybody. And it's okay if it's not. There's so many different strategies. You can find a strategy that does work for you. More importantly, it's really about your end game. And that end game might be financial freedom. It might be taking care of your family. It might be generating long-term wealth. Whatever that is, find the investments, find the businesses, find the strategies that can help you reach that goal. You started talking about the Rise business framework because as you were kind of going through that later transition, you had people reaching out to you saying, hey, can you help me with my business? And then you started doing that. That ultimately led to kind of the Rise business framework. Can you explain to our listeners exactly what the Rise business framework is?
Yeah, it's an operating system. It's a framework that you can implement in your business to not like conform your business to a box, but very much to customize for your company to give it what it's needed in order to grow properly. So, Harvard Business Review talks about the 5 stages, what business growth is and what we go through. And so when I created Rise, I understood the 5 phases, but I was like, how do you move from phase to phase? And Rise is kind of that thing. It's the bridge from stage to stage, which is why it has 4 quadrants, because there's 4 bridges through 5 stages. And so everybody finds themselves in one of these 5 stages. Now, what I find interesting is a lot of times we'll have business entrepreneurs that their business grows to like a revenue or gross profit percentage of a stage 3, stage 4, even a stage 5 business, but they're still running it with a stage 1 operating system, which is them, right? And so they find themselves needing to let go or not being able to let go, and they find themselves burned out. The common thing that happens when somebody calls me before they have Rise implemented is they go, I want my time back,
Mhm.
right? That's what they say. I want my time back. I want my time back. I want my time back. But the problem is when they don't grow properly and they start to let go and they lose control and they don't have KPIs and good meeting structure and all those things, they start to lose money. And so they go from I want my time back to I want my money back. Right. So it's just this chant I hear all the time in the back of my head. I want my time back. I want my time back. And then they get there and they don't do it right. And they go, I want my money back. I want my money back. So like this vicious cycle, then they let everybody go and they go back to 1 to 3 and they're back into working in their business and they feel rejuvenated because they kind of taken a vacation, even though it failed. And they come back in and they feel re-inspired and they're like, I'm going to do this again. And they build back up and they get to, a stage 4, stage business to 5 business again. And then it happens again and they recycle the employees and go back in the business. And it's just constant cycle. And all that tells us is that they're not growing properly. Right. And so because they're not having a framework or a system to follow, it leaves them in that cycle. Right. And so that's what I noticed very early on. And that really never happened to me. And I was trying to figure out like, why not me and all these other guys that are in these masterminds that I see. And it just came down to my years of training on business, like how I run a business. And and what was normal cadence for me wasn't normal for everybody else. I get into start helping people when they ask me to come help them. And I go, well, all right, well, send me your KPIs. Well, what do you want to see? What are your KPIs? Well, what's a KPI? What do you mean by KPI?
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you how many deals I closed. Okay, well, can you tell me how many appointments you went on? How many offers you made? What your closing percentage is? What your cost per closing is? Can you tell me what your cost per lead is? What is your ROAS? And I'm running through all these numbers, and I'm like, "What are your numbers, bro?" And he's like, "I don't know." And I'm like, "Well, how do you like show me your P&L? Let me look at your profit and loss." Well, I mean, I don't have a P&L. I keep all
Uh-huh.
my stuff on my entries on my computer. I'm like, well, how do you know if you can make enough money to pay payroll? It's like sell another house, when at payroll, I don't know. I know I got to sell 3 houses to make payroll. And I'm like, man, that's not the way to live. That's not the way to run a business. So I started to notice what I took for granted and was easy for me wasn't common knowledge for others. And so I just started to document like what they needed. If you're in stage 1 of business, well, and you're the person doing all the work, and it's like, well, how did you get here? Well, I had a passion, I had a product, and I made money. I made profit. The 3 P's to why we started our business: passion, a product, and profits. That's why we do it, right? And we kick it off. I mean, I've never met anybody that's like, I'm not passionate about this, but I'm gonna keep doing it. I'm gonna build a massive business. Or I'm not making money, so I'm gonna keep not making money. Or every day one day they're selling hamburgers, the next day they're selling pancakes, and the next day they're selling Allison's. I mean, that's not a business either, right? So you got to have a product. Those three things have to happen. But we get there, right? We have a passion, we have a product, we're making profits. But then we need resources, which is what the R stands for in RISE. Resources. What are resources? Time, money, and people. Just like a tree grows, it needs resources. It needs sun and nutrients and water and things like that. Well, a business needs resources to grow, and it needs time, money, and people. Your time, and where do you spend your time? Money, how much money do you need to make, and how much money you're going to keep, right? Perform. And then last, like, what people do I need to help me there? Do I need contractors? Do I need vendors? Do I need employees? Do I need partners? What do I need? What do I need to get this business off the ground? And so what happens is we got to come in and evaluate where you spend your time. What is in the best interest of the company for John to work in? Because the average business can have anywhere from 40 to 60 seats when it first starts. Some of them are an hour a week, some of them are 10 hours a week. But we still have them, right? We still have marketing, we still have operations, we still have sales, we still have finances, and we still have the subsets of all those departments within an organization. And that could add up really quick. Even if it's like a half an hour a week, it can still be a seat. Because at scale, it's 40 hours a week. Stage one, it's maybe an hour a week. And so we got to understand what those seats are in an organization. We got to understand where John should work in the business, right? But then we got to figure out what seats you shouldn't sit in and what other people we need to hire. But in order to do those two things, we got to figure out the money. We got to figure out how much money you need to make, how much money you need to spend, how much money you need to keep. And just like when you buy a house or you buy an apartment complex, you do a business or a product pro forma, and you evaluate the ARV and the cash flow and the ROI and all those things. That's a performance of the product. We created business pro forma for your business. And we evaluate what you're going to do month by month and what your expenditures need to be and what you're going to keep. And that way we have a true sense of profits, right? And that way we know when we hit this certain revenue, then we can afford to spend this certain amount of money, and that way we'll maintain our profit without losing profits. Because nobody got into this not to make money. But a business performance helps protect that projectional growth and protect that ultimate number at the bottom, which is the profit percentage. And that's what we're looking at. And so then once we have those things dialed in, we move into stage two, right? Stage two is that grind where we're like, how do we get out of the grind? How do we get to the next level? And how do we create some level of sustainability, which is stage three? Well, we have to inspire the resources, right? We have to create a vision. Bible says there's no vision, the people perish. So we got to have a vision. We don't have the business or people to perish in our company, quit. So we have to have a vision plan. We have to have a long-term vision. We have to have short-term vision. We have to make sure we have the right people around us. We have to have values and vision, right? How do I know that you're the right person for my company? Well, what are your values? Do they align with mine? And can my vision help you achieve yours? Right? So we have to have vision and value alignment. I call it the double V effect. And then we have to have, what else do we have to have? We have to have long-term vision. We have to have short-term vision. We have to build the right culture for the organization. We have to understand the right purpose for the company. And we have to inspire our people. We got to be inspired ourselves, and we got to inspire the people to come with us. And when we do that, we start to create some level of sustainability. People are able to start letting go without losing control. We teach the art of delegation and inspiration. Leadership. How do we become better leaders? I see a lot of people get stuck right here, John. This is probably the area that I see most entrepreneurs get stuck in. Hiring people, usually not a problem. Making money, not a problem. Getting the right people on the team, they can actually be somewhat good at that as well. But the problem I see with a lot of entrepreneurs is not letting go. They hire all these people, but they actually end up being assistants. We call them marketing directors and operations managers and finance and all that. But all they are is really the assistant to you. So you can make all the decisions and go tell them what to do, all things you don't want to do. And so we teach the art of delegation, how to let go properly without losing control. Right? I had a guy call me last week, and he was talking about, his growth, and he was saying, I just don't feel like it's working for me. I'm not growing where I want to be. And that's why I'm interested in hiring you guys. He's like, but just, before I hire you, like, what do you think my problem is? I said, well, your problem is pretty obvious to me. He says, what is it? I said, it's you. Your problem is you. And he was like, wow, that's pretty brutally honest. I'm like, well, Brian, I don't do this for the money, right? I do this to help people. And so if you want me to sugarcoat it, I'll sugarcoat it. But at the end of the day, bro, the problem's you. He's like, well, what about this? I told you about the problem I'm having with this person. I'm the problem I'm having with this person and the problem I'm having with this process. I'm like, can I be honest with you again? He said, sure. I said, you have the team you deserve.
Dude.
You have the team you deserve. If you want a better team, you got to become a better leader. A players don't want to work for a B leader. So you got to level up, man. If you want to level up, you'll get A players come work for you, and then these problems are solved. But the problem is not the person. The problem is you. He's like, well, like, man, when I hired them, I thought they were going to be better than they are. I was like, well, when you failed them. And he's like, well, how did I fail them? I said, well, you failed them the day you hired them. You should have never hired them. It's still your fault. He's like, I said, did you evaluate their vision? Did you evaluate where they wanted to go? Did you evaluate their values? No, man, I didn't do any of that. They've been doing real estate for 15 years. Okay, well, you failed. You failed by bringing people on your team that were the wrong people. You may have put them in the right seat, but they're the wrong people. It's still your fault. So then we get to sustainability, right? We get the I quadrant dialed in. And now, if we're truly going to let go, we're truly going to expand this business and get it in formation to where it's making good money, we have to have systems. We have to have processes. We have to have procedures. We have to have policies. We have to have AI. We have to have technology. We have to have good meeting structure. We have to have good communication. And I tell people, like, that's the key to that next jump, is when we can truly empower the business to make decisions with process, procedures, and policies. And I'll tell you, if you're in this stage, you know you're here. Because it's probably the most dreadful stage you get in if you don't do it right. Like, you can make it through stage 1 and stage 2 and not be a great leader and get there and kind of grind it out. But stage 3, man, it's one of the most revealing, because what happens is you're working more than you ever have. You know, process, procedures, and policies help us document the rules of the company. And the rules take care of the decisions 75% of the time or more. As leaders, we're not here for the rules. We're here for the exceptions. And when we document process, procedures, and policies, and it takes care of the rule, which is 75% of the times or more that this should happen, you're not needed. You're only needed for the exceptions of things that happen that are outside the what? The rules, right? Somebody calls off. Somebody didn't show up on time. The closing didn't happen. You know, we found out that there's title work issues. Those are not part of the rules. And so when that happens, that's why we need leaders. We need managers to manage those exceptions. But I'll tell you, the reason why you're so busy in this stage is because you haven't taken time to document the process, procedures, and policies. And so therefore, when you don't have process, procedures, and policies to manage the rule, guess what? Everything's an exception. So you're needed for everything, right? And that's when we find ourselves extremely busy. We go from being the what person, like, I'm going to do this, this, and this, to be the how person, and where everybody calls you and goes, how do I do this? How do I do this? How do I do this? And when you have 15 employees and the business is scaling and growing, and you're the how person, you're never going to be busier than you have been in your life in that moment.